And the court case, is that addressing the content of the bill or the way the bill was passed? We made sure that there was no violation of the inviolable contract. So there was no mention of the inviolable contract. The lawsuit brings up 3 readings. In the Kentucky Constitution, it says that every bill shall be read publicly 3 times before it passes. Well, 3 times publicly means that the entire bill has to be read 3 times before it passes in each stage of the bill. And Kentucky suspended that way of doing it. They suspended that in 1897. And what they did in 1897, they started what we call they're read by title only 3 times, and that requires, the minimum it takes to pass a bill is 5 days, and that's how long it takes to get its 3 readings. But we follow Mason's manual and parliamentary procedure. And in Mason's manual, under parliamentary procedure, amendments or bill substitutions do not require 3 readings. And so that's what we did. We substituted Senate Bill 1 into Senate Bill 151, and we removed a lot of stuff from Senate Bill 1 that folks were upset about. We removed a lot of that and put it into Senate Bill 51 and passed that. But under our current rules, under Mason's, if you follow Mason's rule and follow parliamentary procedure, we'll see what they do. But if the courts declare that every bill has to be read, publicly 3 times, and every amendment has to be read, if it's amended that it had to have 3 readings, every bill that since 1897 could be, reviewed and declared unconstitutional also, because most bills that passed are amended. When a House passes a bill, it comes to the Senate, or the vice versa. Senate passes a bill, it goes to the House. And every bill that passes, there's always somebody that sees an opportunity to make that bill better. So that's where we're at. The other question that they bring up, Senate Bill 151 only received 49 votes in the House. Now, for an appropriation bill, it would have required 51 votes. And so the lawsuit says that this bill should have required 51 votes to pass. So again, the courts will have to decide that. It's the ball's in their hands right now, and so we'll see what happens. There's something that I'll certainly look at. There's a lot of constitutions require that if a bill is amended, that the subject matter be the same, and our Constitution doesn't have that. So that would be something we might look at, that you can't amend a bill that's for wastewater treatment, amend it to a pension bill. The bill could only be amended if we do a constitutional amendment to change it. It could only be amended to be something of the same subject matter.
Now, another issue that we want to address quickly too is the charter schools. Tell us what the status of that is, and what's your hope, if elected, what would you like to see happen with charter schools?
Well, charter schools, there's a lot of concern that every school system in Kentucky will be taken over as a charter school, and that's simply not true. I worked on that bill when it passed the House and came to the Senate. I worked to make sure that local boards of education, a charter school cannot become a charter school unless the local board of education approves it. So that's very important. And so you will not see a charter school in Marion or Nelson County unless the local school boards approve that, and Barstown Independent. So that was a very important part of it. The only reason that I support charter schools is for Jefferson County. And Gary, there's a real issue in Jefferson County. It's been going on for years. Dr. Holliday, several years ago, the Commissioner of Education, called it educational genocide. That we have a group of African American kids, a large portion of African American kids, are simply not receiving a good education in Jefferson County for one reason or another. And Jefferson County has some great schools. It's got some of the best schools in the state, but it also has the worst schools in the state. And most of those bad schools are in the West End, where it's predominantly African American. I read an article in the Courier Journal a few weeks ago. A young black guy, a young African American, had been a student there, joined a gang, went to prison. Now he's back working with young African American boys to try to, to change their life and to keep them out of jail. But he said that the Jefferson County school system was the pipeline to prison for those kids in the West End. So that's why I supported charter schools. The proficiency or the gap, but the educational attainment gap between African Americans and white students in Jefferson County. Proficiency level in Jefferson County for a white student is over 60%. The rate for African American students is 30% or below. And so there's a real issue there. I represent part of Jefferson County. I feel that I have a moral obligation to try to help those students. And we had a large group of African American ministers that came to Frankfort almost on a daily basis, begging us to help them do something. Now, the charter schools has motivated, I think, Jefferson County schools to start looking at trying something different. This year, Jefferson County schools opened a charter-like school, and the Du Bois Middle School, that's the name of it, Du Bois, and it's a school for it's a middle school for African American young boys, young men, and they're required to wear a coat and tie every day, and it's very structured. Discipline is very, they very disciplined school, and it's making a difference. It's receiving great reviews, and that's what charter schools do. It works with those problem kids in those problem areas, and tries to, raise their education attainment, because, we have a gang problem in Jefferson County. Not many want to admit it, but we have it. We see all the shootings. It's constantly on the news about shootings in the West End of Louisville, and a lot of that is gang related, and a lot of those gangs are young people that have dropped out of school, are simply not happy in school, and so they join the gang. So to change that culture, the only way we can change that culture, I think, is through education. And is charter schools the answer? I don't know, but I just want to see something happen in Western Jefferson County that helps those young African American to succeed and be able to go on and live productive lives, not end up in prison. And that's my goal. I don't see charter schools being an issue anywhere in Kentucky, any rural county, especially in the counties that I represent, because we have good school systems, good administrators, and great teachers in all the area that I represent. I don't represent the West End of Louisville, but that's where the issue is, and that's why we passed charter school legislation, is to help them. Now, we didn't fund charter schools this year. Charter schools have not been funded, and we won't fund them until we fully fund the education budget. And when we fully fund that, we have additional dollars, and if there's continues to be a need for charter schools, which I think there will be in the West End of Louisville, that's where you'll see charter schools, if you see any. And the only reason you see them there is because there is a need for something different. Jefferson County has to do something different. They have to.
Now, I also want to mention, as you mentioned, you cover Jefferson County, and not far from where you do cover, there was just a shooting last week at a Kroger store, and 2 individuals were shot just because of the color of their skin, and there was a hate crime there. Is there any talk of potential legislation to help with that issue?
Well, you know, if you're talking about, you know, some sort of gun control, Gary, gun control laws only affect the law-abiding citizens. Somebody that wants to break the law still won't break the law. Where I see the biggest potential is in mental health services, and probably we'll find that gentleman had a mental issue.
Well, anybody who kills people has to have a mental issue.
Well, but I mean, a history of mental health issues. Yes, if you want to kill somebody, you definitely have an issue. But you know, I think if we really have to, you know, really have to work on that, especially in our schools. I think that's one of the things that mental health issues is a big issue, and we need to really use resources to make sure that we have, you know, mental health services are available to those individuals who need them. And if you're arrested and you know, determined that you have a mental health issue, that we get you some help. But it's an unfortunate thing. It's unfortunate anytime you hear that somebody is shot. And you know, of course, you don't have to use a gun to be destructive. We read about all the pipe bombs that were just mailed, and so there's then you know, there's many ways if somebody is going to harm people. There's many ways to do it. So we need to work on the cause, and I think the cause in many of these instances is mental health issues, and that kind of transitions, Gary, right into school safety, which is a big issue. And we've been spending the interim talking about school safety, and probably one of the biggest issues in our schools. We see studies that say that at least 20% of our students have some sort of issues that, and they need mental health. They need help with their mental health, and so that's one of our goals is, you know, to try to see that we have each school has counselors and mental health professionals that can help these students with mental health issues to get them help early, so that they don't grow up and be like some of these individuals that have been involved in crimes that have a repeated history of mental health issues. So if you can catch it early, but that's one of the parts of school safety is the mental health issues and getting those young folks that have mental health issues and getting them help.
And again, I'm talking with State Senator Jimmy Higdon, who will be on the ballot on November 6th for the 14th district, which covers Marion and Nelson counties. And as we close, Jimmy, if re-elected for your 4-year term as state senator, what would you like to see accomplished in that 4-year term? What would be your major goal that you'd like to see?
Well, you know, to continue to you know, move Kentucky forward. You know, right now in Kentucky, our unemployment rate is at all-time low. There's a real demand for the first time since 2008. There's a real demand for workers, and so we're starting to see the wage rates really increase. You know, from 2008 to you know, really to 2017. I always talked about it as a new normal. There was no real demand for employees and for skilled workers, and we saw wages being very stagnant. There was no growth in wages to speak of. It was kind of the new normal. But now we starting to see, you know, investments in Kentucky, $9 billion. I think over the last 2 years, the national economy is doing well. Kentucky's starting to keep up with the national economy. And we see that, again, a real demand for workers, for skilled labor, and we see a lot of pressure on wages for wages to continue to increase. And that's a good thing. That's what we work for, Gary, is to have that environment that's conducive to attract business and industry to Kentucky. And so that's one of the things that I'll continue to work on. That's one of my jobs, is to create that environment to make sure that our you know, economy, that the folks in Kentucky that want to work, or that there's good jobs available. Another issue with right now in the job market, there's there's a real shortage of skilled labor, and or those that even entry level. There's a real shortage, and so one of the futures of training our workforce is getting kids involved at high school students involved in to help them get not only college ready but career ready, and the state typically doesn't do a excellent job on some of these programs, but and usually we have all these silos in Frankfort and they don't coordinate. But we have over the last, it started longer than 2 years ago. It's been coming about for the last 3 years or 4. Is cooperation between the Labor Cabinet, the Education Cabinet, and the Department of Education, Gary, that they start working together to promote apprenticeships, school to work, and co-op jobs where juniors and seniors in high school can, if they have the available time in their schedule, to go out and work in an industry, and work with somebody in that industry and start learning those soft skills that we badly need. And soft skill is, just those things that you and I take for granted, understanding how to take instructions and showing up on time and just those things. So I think these type things, this workforce development is the future of training our future workforce. And I think, as far as the education, they're getting an education, but those soft skills are lacking. They're, the places that we traditionally used to have those places where young people received, got their those soft skills are not available to today's kids. And so that is important, and we see that happening, and we see that happening here in Marion County. It's growing very slowly. One of the issues right now, and I challenge any of the business and industry that's watching, to reach out to your area technology center in either the one in Marion or the one in Nelson. They have a lot of students on the list that are ready for a co-op or a job shadowing or apprenticeship. They have students there that qualify. But that's our biggest problem right now with implementing that. We have some resistance from business and industry to allow those students to come in their front door. So I've been working and challenging a lot of the local industries to open their doors and to give this a try, and I think they'll be successful if they just give it a shot.
Again, Election Day is November the 6th, and for State Senator in District 14, which would be Marion and Washington, or Marion and Nelson. A
couple other issues that I hope when we talk about in 4 years that we've opioids is a huge issue, and I read a issue the other day about fentanyl, and a little sugar packet, sweet and low or whatever, little packet of that much fentanyl is a lethal dosage for 500 people. And and that's what we're seeing. That's what's causing a lot of the deaths that we see is the fentanyl. And it's just a big problem when you got something that small can cause that many deaths. It's very difficult. So that's a problem we have to address. One of the answers is to make sure that we double down, or we really devote resources to make sure that kids at a young age and all the way through school are taught the dangers of addiction. And I know we're doing a good job at that in the schools, but we need to do more emphasis on that. And we drug rehabilitation. We're working at that. We can do better. One of the things that I'd like to see is, right now we spend about 25% of our law enforcement cases and 25% of our cases we see in courts are for small quantities of marijuana. At some point, I'd like to see us decriminalize small quantities of marijuana, where they don't clog up the court system and clog up our law enforcement with enforcing those laws, and where everybody can devote all their attention to the major problem, fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin, and try to get as much of that off the streets as we can, because that's important. Right now, Gary, my understanding is that cocaine and heroin are very cheap. Mm-hmm. The supply is it's readily available. So if we can cut down on that supply and it's not so readily available, and we see that cost increase, supply and demand, as cost goes up, hopefully the usage will go down. So that's that's something that we talk about. Another thing, as we mentioned marijuana, that I support medical marijuana. We'll make sure that if we do it, or when we do it, it'll happen, that it's done the right way. There are some out there that would like to see medical marijuana passed. It's really so far-reaching that it's almost recreational marijuana disguised as medical marijuana, and I think we need to make sure that that doesn't happen in Kentucky, that it's truly for medical purposes, and try to do that the right way when we do it. We have a lot of states we can look to on that, and a lot of states have passed that legislation, and I'm sure that'll be a topic of a lot of conversation this session. I guess that, we'll continue to look at school safety. We will continue to look at, our tax modernization. We like I said, we have some unintended consequences there. We will continue to monitor pensions. That's a big portion of our budget now, to pay that unfunded liability. It's a bigger problem than most people realize. I didn't realize what a huge problem it was till I got involved really with pensions in probably 2010, 2012, trying to, we thought at one time that if there's abuses in the pension system. We have spiking and just a lot of different things that are going on in pensions, and we thought for a long time that would cure all the ills if we try to take care of some of the abuses. But as we tightened down on the abuses, we found that hey, this is a problem. It contributes to the unfunded liability, but the unfunded liability is there. It continues to grow because we weren't even paying the interest on it. So, and the reason that I ended up being somebody that has spoken out and being very involved in pension reform is the fact that in 2005, Kentucky passed a pension bill, or legislative pension bill, that most people are aware of, that we enhanced legislators' retirement for those that could go on to take another job and actually spike their pensions, and that's available in a lot of positions across the state. A lot of people don't realize that magistrates have a pension, and they're, I don't know what they're paid a month. It's gone up. It used to be $1,000 a month, but they could be serve as a magistrate for 20 years at $1,000 a month, and can retire and go on to be county judge or some other position, and they can, whatever that, if they went to $100,000, say they went to be county judge, and that paid $90,000 a year, and they did that for 4 or 5 years, that they could retire on that money instead of the $1,000 a year they made for 20 years. And that's part of our problem with pensions. They're based on your last 5 years of service, and it probably should have been averaged over time, but that's how we set the system up, and that's the way it is. That's one of the things with the hybrid cash balance. It averages over the years. It doesn't average base your retirement amount on those last 5 years. So that's
like your predecessor. He can be judge, and
right.
That's happened with
so that's how I got involved in pensions, and like I said, I was very involved in this pension, working on Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 151. I didn't agree sometime on all the things that they were doing. There was probably meetings that I was excluded from because I was very vocal about not breaking the viable contract and doing pensions the right way. So again, I voted for Senate Bill 151. I do support the changes in there. And I think the argument, Gary, is not over the changes that were in the bill. The argument, and most teachers that I talk to, they said, Jimmy, we're not mad at you. We're mad about the process, and we're mad at the governor. And so we'll see where pensions go, but it is going to be one of those issues that we have to constantly monitor, and because it is a liability.
And our viewers had the chance to vote on November 6th. And again, I have Jimmy Higdon here, who is for state senator for Marion and Nelson counties in our area, and asking for your vote on November 6th.
Gary, I humbly ask for your vote on November 6th. I can look you in the eye and tell you that I've give you my very best. In fact, I made that promise, Gary, in 2002 that when I ran, that I was pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and that I would give you my very best. And those promises still hold true today. I'd also, again, remind people to go vote on November the 6th, and remind them that, through the years since the American Revolution, hundreds of thousands of brave young men and women, Americans, have given their lives to protect our rights. And plus, millions and millions of veterans have gone to war and served our country to defend our rights. And one of those rights is the right to vote. So please exercise that right to vote on November 6th. And in fact, if you vote in honor of a veteran. And again, thank you for allowing me to serve as your senator, and look forward to serving you for 4 more years if that's what the people decide. And thank you very much for your consideration and your vote on November the 6th.
This has been Political Focus here on Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television.